Hi, my name is Robert. This video is designed to give you step-by-step detailed instructions on completing the task at hand. Please read the comments in the About section of this video. It has valuable information and updates. My YouTube channel has a disclaimer video that I encourage you to watch. And please like, share, and subscribe. I hope you found what you're looking for. Thank you very much for watching. Before you determine that it's 100% the fuel pump is bad, you do want to go in here and either replace the fuel pump relay or go ahead and pull it and jump the pins to see if that fuel pump is running at all. If your fuse is good and you jump the relay and you still don't hear no fuel pump, then go ahead and order you a fuel pump. On this video, I'm going to remove and replace the fuel pump unit on this Volvo 850. You open up the back, you remove the cargo flooring, you access the fuel pump access panel, and then you unscrew the cap on it. You do not have to drop the fuel tank. The wires are outside of that area in the cargo area, so you unplug them and you make sure you got a good seal when you put it all back together. The only complicated thing about it is if you decide to replace the pump inside the housing unit instead of the entire pump assembly. Let's get started. Here are the tools you'll need, or I recommend when you do the fuel pump replacement job, especially if you're going to replace the pump and not the whole assembly. I use that style oil filter wrench to actually get the fuel tank pump assembly cap off. You want some snips so you can cut your wire ties. You want a 10mm boxing and a 10mm ratchet. I use those long curved needle nose pliers actually to help me get the fuel lines off of the top of the pump assembly. Then I use that little tool there, screwdriver, to open up the clamshell, help get that stuff loose from the fuel pump once I'm inside. Some rubber gloves, some wire ties, and some kind of lubrication or lubrication spray to put on the seal to get the seal back in, because you want a tight seal and you don't want to do that with a dry one. When you know you got to get a pump, it's always best to get good quality parts. Bosch is the OEM pump that came out of this car, so we went back in with a Bosch, and there may be a couple others, but I highly recommend that you do not get a cheap and expensive pump somewhere that you got to build into the unit. Go ahead and get you a good Bosch pump or something equivalent. There's some numbers off the box there, and it just dropped in nice and easy with no issues at all. So to access the fuel pump, you go ahead and you fold down your rear seats. You come in the back of the car and you lift this panel up and out and fold that panel all the way up on the seats that you've folded down like that. Next, you can go ahead and remove this piece of carpet piece. Since this car had the jump seats in it, you gotta loop it around the little seat belt things there, and then the fuel pump access door will be right there. Get to the fuel pump unit, that's the access there, and you use a 10mm to pull those 5 bolts off. You don't have to drop the fuel tank. Now that we have the cap off of this, I looked down at the actual fuel cap and it has some markings on it with some numbers. So you can make a notation of the numbers and the orientation of how these lines are, so when you put it back together, you put it back in the right angle. Next thing you do is disconnect the lines from the top of the fuel unit. To get the fuel lines released from the top of the fuel pump, same thing for your fuel filter. You want to take some hooked needle nose pliers or a trim clip puller or something like that, and you want to get them under the line a little bit like this and just work it right up. The lines come right off. So that's how you get these fuel lines off of these pumps and fuel filters, stuff like that. It's pretty easy when you got this hook tool to just pry under them and lift those lines off. And then when you go to put them on, just press them back on. They have a built-in release in them. When you pry that up, it just takes care of the release, so you can pry those things off. If you grab the ends up here, you can break the fuel line or the connection, and they'll slide off. Now the next thing you need to do is get the ring loose from the top of the fuel pump unit. Now in this Volvo 850, you got a couple of fuel vacuum lines that run along this cap, and you don't want to damage them. So be careful when taking this tank cap ring off. I have one of these type of oil filter wrenches, and those are good for grabbing that thing and twisting that loose. Now that I got the ring loose, I'm going to go ahead and pull the wire and disconnect the wire. The plug should be right around there. When I followed the cord up, I had to detach the plugs from this little wall clip, and then there has a little zip tie there, and it's the one with the red wire going into the gray plug is the one that I need to disconnect and free. Yeah, I pulled the ring off, I got it unplugged. Now I'm going to go ahead and lift it out. Here's the fuel pump unit, and as you can tell, it does not have the fuel sending unit attached to it. That's in another access panel under the trunk. So this is just the fuel pump thing. The assembly slides out the bottom, and that's the fuel sock. So what we're going to do, we're going to unplug the fuel pump leads. You can't get them mixed up. You got a positive and a negative. If you get them mixed up, the pump right run backwards. Then you have the fuel line there that attaches to the top of the pump up there to the line. So I'm going to take that line loose, and I'm going to disconnect those two wires. Then I'm going to unlatch this assembly here and here and slide the assembly out. This wire here on this side had a release tab that I had to push from the other side to get it to release from the prong in there. And they're different size, so it should be hard to mix them up when you put the new fuel pump in. I pushed those tabs in, started to slide that unit out. So I pushed each side in with a flat tip screwdriver. Be careful you don't try to push it too hard. You don't want to crack your assembly. As you see, the unit has some kind of spring-loaded clip in there. You got your fuel line that you'd have to swap over to a new pump. It has a clamshell type releases, so you can push those releases and open it up to get it to fuel pump. Now we actually have a whole fuel pump unit assembly, but I'm going to take this apart so you can see what it looks like with the pump out. I took a flat tip screwdriver, push it on the ends to free those. Then there's another latch at the very bottom there, and you can get this open on both sides that way. So you got the bottom lock, then those two latches. So you got your sock there, some kind of rubber gasket to absorb vibrations on the bottom. Then you got this kind of like a shock absorber at the top of it to keep it pressed down toward the bottom of the tank. If you're going to just replace the pump, this is what you're dealing with. But as I explained, we have the whole unit here. So I'm going to go ahead and lubricate the seal and transfer this over into the car and hook it up and test it out. In putting in this fuel pump unit in, the first thing I did was lubricate the seal, set the seal on top of the tank. Then I set the sending unit down and snugged it in as tight as I could, just pushing it in. Then I thread the wire through the cap and I screwed the cap on. Be extra careful when screwing that cap on so you don't get it cross-threaded. You don't want to mess up the plastic in the cap. And then you go ahead and remove the dust caps and install your fuel line before you get the cap all the way tightened down. Just in case you have to pivot that fuel pump unit in a little bit, twist it clockwise or counterclockwise to make sure that lines up. So I'm going to pull the dust caps off, I'm going to connect the fuel lines, plug in the electrical plug, and I don't have it all the way tight yet, but we're going to make sure the car starts. Okay, we're going to turn the key, listen for the pump to prime. Sound like it's priming. Alright, shut it off. Got a little bit of a fuel leak here, so one of these lines are not down all the way. So we're going to go ahead and make sure those fuel lines are down all the way and start this over. Had a slight leak coming out of one of the fuel lines. I think this fuel line wasn't far enough to the front. So this line here looks like it's almost pointed back to the most rear part. But you want to line these lines up to make sure that they'll go all the way on those fuel lines, because if they don't, you'll have a leak and you'll be pulling it back up. So you may want to connect those lines, make sure they're all the way seated before you tighten the cap all the way down. Once you have your fuel lines on and you're ready to try to start the car, you want to prime the fuel system first. And how you do that is you turn the key on but don't start it. You let the pump run, and when you don't hear the pump running no more, which is about 2 or 3 seconds, you turn the key off. And you want to cycle the key off and on 3 times. And then on the 4th time, you want to go ahead and start the car. This time we don't appear to have any fuel leaking. And the car fired right up. So we're good to go. You want to store your wires, put them back in the zip tie. Your wiring harness coming off your pump assembly goes into that rubber grommet, so you want to put that back whenever you go to button this up. Put this cover back on, just check it under the car maybe in a week or so. Make sure you're not leaking fuel after a fill up. If you feel that this information was useful, please like it and share it with your social media friends. You can subscribe to my channel so that you will get notifications of future videos that I post. You can follow me on Twitter, and if you need to contact me directly, please visit my website. And if you have any questions, leave them below, and someone or myself will reply to them. Again, thank you very much for watching.